tonight. So first of all, let me say thank you for hanging in there. I know it's been a long day. It's starting to get dark. People are probably getting hungry, you know, types of things. But no, I think it's been a very insightful, impactful day. And I appreciate everybody's engagement. So the final thing we have is a set of closing remarks by Dr. Bey-Ling Sha from Cal State Fullerton. So there she is. All righty. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for giving me the hardest job of the entire summit. I know I looked like I was playing Words with Friends on my phone, but really I was taking notes because I was supposed to summarize everybody's comments. I have 3 basic message points for today's closing remarks, and I've kind of organized these remarks around 1, diversity and democracy, 2, identity and intersectionality, and 3, analysis and action. So first, with respect to diversity and democracy, all of us are here today at this DEI Summit because we believe, obviously, in the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We heard from public relations practitioners who shared their personal experiences and offered excellent advice. We heard from public relations scholars whose research showed, depressingly, that not much has actually changed in our profession with regard to DEI, and they shared some ideas for organizations to keep getting better. For my part, I would like to talk about how DEI is critical, not merely to our professional practice of public relations so that our organizations can successfully survive. DEI is also critical to our national practice of democracy, so that, as President Lincoln said at Gettysburg, government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. So, how exactly does diversity matter to democracy? Well, for starters, if democracy is defined as government of the people, by the people, for the people, then obviously full democracy is only possible when it involves all the people. And all the people means literally that, everyone, period. No matter what race, color, or creed, no matter what gender, sexual identity, or sexual orientation, no matter what immigration status, ability, health, or wealth, a true democracy includes everyone in the full diversity of that collective. So, a truly, fully functioning government of the people, by the people, for the people is only possible when it involves all the people, when all the people participate. Participation in democracy is not just about voting, although you should be doing that this month if you can, because that's obviously very important, that people who are legally enfranchised to vote do so, and that they actually have access to the ballot and can cast their votes without interference or intimidation. Participation in democracy is also about having equal and equitable access to privileges granted to all by the U.S. Constitution, and in particular by the First Amendment. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom to gather or congregate, and freedom to petition for redress of grievances. And inclusive participation in democracy means that every individual can exercise their right to these freedoms without fear of ridicule, without fear of suppression, without fear of violence, whether to one's self, to one's loved ones, or to one's community. So in short, a fully functioning democracy simply cannot exist without acknowledging, accepting, and most importantly, empowering that democratic society's full diversity. So now let me talk about identity and intersectionality. Clearly, the concept of democracy is central to the core identity of the United States. Democracy is who we are, or at least it's who we claim to want to be. Democracy is our nation's avowed identity. As we heard from all of today's speakers, democracy and identity, well, they As we heard from all of today's speakers, identity can be complex. And this is true for countries as well as for individuals. So just as countries are composed of diverse groups of people, so are individuals composed of a multitude of identities. And those identities intersect in different ways. And this is complicated, obviously. Yet, as Sonia Diaz said today, one problem in doing DEI work is that everyone wants there to be a formula. And really, there is no formula. There is no easy solution, because intersectionality is so complicated and DEI work is a long game. The public relations industry really has come so far in recognizing that identities are multifaceted and that each individual's myriad identity facets intersect in different ways. Now, I would challenge us, especially those of us who hold positions of leadership in our organizations, I challenge us to now go beyond acknowledging intersecting identities to analyzing how various identity intersections impact people and organizations. And that brings me to my third point, analysis and action. Intersectionality is not just about the intersection of various identities. As Dr. Natalie Tyndall emphasized, we cannot talk about intersectionality without talking about power and power differences. So let me be clear that intersectionality is about analyzing all the ways in which the identities and the intersections of identities impact different people in different ways. Because different identities have differing levels of privilege and power in our societies, systems, and structures. And organizational leaders need to understand how identities intersect in individuals so that we can understand how individuals intersect with each other in the workplace. Because it's those employee intersections and interactions that make people feel included or excluded. And as Dr. Nilanjana Barden and many others reminded us, employees need to feel included, to feel that we belong. Charlene Wheelis talked earlier today about imposter syndrome, and she emphasized the importance of being true to who you are, to being true to all of who you are, so that all of you can belong. I would actually say that there are no imposters in the workplace. Not really. There are only people, fully complex humans, whose colleagues and leaders and even allies have failed to make feel welcome, to help feel that they belong. Tanisha Jackson Warner talked about allyship being when a person of greater privilege helps someone who is marginalized or someone with lesser privilege. Let's really take time to reflect on that and to analyze our own intersecting identities, because each of us has some identities of greater privilege and power who can be allies. And at the same time, each of us has identities of lesser privilege and lesser power who need allies. And that is the power of intersectionality as an analytic framework. So, acknowledging intersectionalities is good. It's an important start. Analyzing identity intersections is great. It's a critical next step. But it's not enough these days to be good or even to be great. These days, we have to be grounded in our goals. And for identity and intersectionality, beyond the goodness of acknowledging and beyond the greatness of analyzing should be the grounded goal of acting, of taking action in support of not only diversity, equity, and inclusion, but action in support of accessibility and social and economic and climate justice. Honestly, for public relations folks like us, this should be a no-brainer. I mean, seriously, public relations is not only about words. It's also about the actions that, in the words of Arthur Page, prove it. Public relations is not just about sending communications out for our organizations. Public relations is also about enacting changes within our organizations. So I will close these remarks and end this year's summit by echoing the message that David Albritton started us off with. Each of us needs to make a commitment to action, to use our personal actions to influence our organization's actions. And I think we do that, each of us, by leveraging intersectionality. How? Well, remember, each of us contains multitudes. Thank you, Walt Whitman. We each have myriad identities. Each of us needs to leverage our identities of greater privilege and greater power to influence positive action and engender change. And we can do that while still honoring our identities of lesser privilege and lesser power, so that we remain grounded in remembering why those changes are necessary. And make no mistake, change is necessary. Specifically, organizational change toward real, fundamental, substantive action in support of DEI. This is necessary, and change requires action. Always. Honestly, y'all, Soon-Mi Kim said today the words that most resonated with me. She said, "I'm getting a little annoyed." Hey, I'm just being my authentic self. But also, Soon-Mi said, let's look at the letters we've been talking about. DEI. She said, we need to play bigger. Instead of DEI, we need TWT, Total World Transformation, and let me tell you, I totally agree. Now, if that feels a little overwhelming, then just remember the words of Tupac Shakur, which I will paraphrase here. I am not saying that I'm going to change the world, but I guarantee that I, and y'all, all of us, by taking action, we will spark the brain that will change the world. And that's our job. It's our job to spark somebody else watching us. So let's get out there and spark things up for total world transformation, because our profession, our organizations, our society, our democracy, all are depending on us to do the actions, to be the spark, to transform with cultural humility ourselves and our own myriad identities. And in doing all of that, we can and we will transform our world together. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I can say as the MC, I felt like I need to close this thing up, but I can't follow that. So the only thing I can do, Obama out.